On a clear Tuesday afternoon, 298 people boarded a plane. They had window seats picked out, meals pre-ordered, connecting flights waiting. Some were heading home. Some were starting a holiday. A family of 4 had saved for months for this trip. A group of researchers were heading to a global conference that could change medicine forever. None of them had any reason to believe this day would be their last stop, but somewhere over a war zone at 33,000 feet, everything stopped. It was July 17, 2014. Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport buzzed with the ordinary chaos of a summer afternoon. Families dragging luggage, coffee cups in hand. A Boeing 777, one of the most trusted aircraft ever built, sat at gate G3, gleaming and ready. Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was a routine service. The route had been flown hundreds of times. Pilots knew it by heart. Air traffic controllers cleared it without hesitation. At 12:31 in the afternoon, the aircraft lifted off the runway and climbed effortlessly into the blue Dutch sky. Aboard were 283 passengers and 15 crew members, citizens from 17 different nations: the Netherlands, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, the United Kingdom. Ordinary people living ordinary lives: students, grandparents, scientists, athletes, and infants still too young to understand what a passport was. The aircraft climbed to cruising altitude and pointed east. Everything was completely normal. For 3 hours and 17 minutes, it was just another flight. Then, at 16:20 local time, air traffic controllers in Ukraine sent a routine communication to the cockpit. No response came back. They tried again. Silence. Aircraft's transponder, the device that broadcasts a plane's identity and altitude to radar stations, had gone dark. In an instant, Flight 17 had simply ceased to exist on every screen it had appeared on just moments before. Search teams were scrambled. Radar data was pulled. And within hours, the unthinkable became real. The wreckage of a Boeing 777 had been found scattered across a 50-square-kilometer field in the Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine, a region that, at that very moment, was caught in the middle of an active armed conflict. The debris field told a story no one wanted to read. The aircraft had not drifted off course. It had not suffered an engine failure. It had not descended slowly. It had broken apart, rapidly, violently, catastrophically, at altitude. All 298 people aboard were gone. News of the disaster rippled across the globe within minutes. In Amsterdam, families who had waved goodbye at departure gates just hours earlier now stood in front of television screens, unable to breathe. In Kuala Lumpur, a city that was still quietly grieving the disappearance of MH17, just 4 months earlier, the news hit like a second devastating blow. World leaders issued statements. Airlines immediately began rerouting flights away from eastern Ukraine. Aviation authorities scrambled to understand how a commercial aircraft had been cleared to fly over an active conflict zone in the first place. The crash site itself was chaotic and deeply contested. It sat in a region where fighting between armed factions made recovery operations extraordinarily dangerous. International investigators appealed for access. Personal belongings, passports, photographs, luggage lay strewn across sunflower fields for days. Before proper teams could safely reach them, the world watched in grief and in disbelief. But amid the mourning, a question burned louder than any other. What brought this plane down? The Dutch Safety Board led the official technical investigation, coordinating with experts from Malaysia, Australia, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Ukraine itself. The task before them was monumental. The wreckage had been scattered across a wide area. Pieces had to be physically collected, transported, and painstakingly reassembled. Hundreds of investigators worked for months, and then years. The black boxes, the flight data recorder, and cockpit voice recorder were recovered and handed over to investigators. Their data was intact. In the cockpit voice recording, the final moments were chillingly routine. The crew was relaxed. No alarms, no warnings, no indication that anything was wrong. And then, in the middle of a sentence, it simply ended. The flight data recorder confirmed that the aircraft had been flying normally, at the correct altitude, on the correct heading. There had been no mechanical failure, no catastrophic structural event from inside the plane. The damage had come from outside. Forensic analysis of the wreckage revealed something precise and unmistakable. Hundreds of tiny, high-velocity perforations had punctured the forward section of the fuselage. The pattern was distinctive. The metallurgy of the fragments embedded in the aircraft's skin and, heartbreakingly, in the remains of those found nearest the front of the plane, told investigators exactly what kind of object had caused this destruction. It was a surface-to-air missile, a Buk missile system, a Soviet-era anti-aircraft weapon, designed to destroy military aircraft flying at high altitude. The Dutch Safety Board's final report, released in October 2015, was unequivocal. Flight MH17 was struck by a 9N314 NE model warhead, detonated above and to the left of the cockpit. The aircraft was destroyed in seconds. The crew and passengers would have had no warning whatsoever. The technical conclusion was damning, but it was only half of the story. A parallel investigation, the Joint Investigation Team, made up of prosecutors and investigators from the Netherlands, Australia, Belgium, Malaysia, and Ukraine, spent years building a criminal case. Their mandate was not just to determine what happened, but who was responsible, using an extraordinary combination of radar data, satellite imagery, telephone intercepts, witness testimony, and open-source intelligence gathered from social media posts. The JIT traced the movement of a specific Buk missile launcher. They tracked it crossing the border into eastern Ukraine, moving to the area from which the missile was fired, and then returning across the border, with one missile missing from its load. In 2019, the JIT announced it had identified 4 individuals as suspects in the case and called for their prosecution. The case proceeded to trial in the Netherlands. In November 2022, 8 years after the disaster, a Dutch court found 3 of the 4 suspects guilty of murder and sentenced them in absentia to life imprisonment. Justice, painfully slow, had spoken. But for the families of 298 people, no verdict could close the wound. The tragedy of MH17 forced the global aviation industry to confront a question it had largely ignored. Should commercial aircraft fly over active conflict zones at all? Before July 17, 2014, dozens of airlines routinely flew over eastern Ukraine. The airspace at high altitude was considered safe. The conflict below was treated as a ground-level concern. The assumption, dangerous and ultimately fatal, was that commercial jets flying at 33,000 feet were simply too high to be at risk. That assumption died over a sunflower field in Donetsk. In the years that followed, the International Civil Aviation Organization overhauled its guidance on conflict zone overflights. Airlines now receive more detailed threat assessments. Governments are required to share intelligence about surface-to-air missile activity in contested regions. The systems that clear aircraft over troubled skies have been fundamentally restructured. It was a reform that should have come sooner. It came at a price no one should ever have had to pay. In the Netherlands, the country that lost the most citizens, 196 of the 298 aboard, July 17th is observed each year with quiet, profound grief. A memorial in Amsterdam serves as a permanent place of reflection. The names of all 298 are etched into the stone. Each one a person, each one a story. There was a grandfather flying to meet his new grandchild for the first time. There were two young sisters traveling with their parents on a dream vacation. There was a group of the world's leading AIDS researchers heading to a conference in Melbourne that could have reshaped global health policy. They were not symbols. They were not statistics. They were people who got on a plane about 10 years on. Flight MH17 remains one of the most documented, most investigated, and most consequential aviation disasters in modern history. The evidence is overwhelming. The verdict has been delivered. The reforms have been written into law, but the most important legacy of M17 has nothing to do with policy or procedure. It is the simple, devastating reminder that behind every flight number, behind every dot on a radar screen, there are human beings. People with names and faces and futures. People who trusted the sky. 298 of them trusted it on July 17th, 2014. We remember every one of them. The tragedy of MH17 changed global aviation forever. Share your thoughts and pay your respects in the comments below. If you value learning about the history, mysteries and tragedies of the sky, hit that like button and subscribe to Mayday Memory.